Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called Racist Boss Harassed Puerto Rican Employees and Broke Labor Laws. Ended up getting deported. From the PROREVENGE subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the original writer's point of view. The link is down below in the description. Enjoy it. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small, northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several successful non-chain establishments, and spent maybe a day or two a month in our location. The rest of the time there was a general manager in charge. We'll call her Jan. Jan was about as type A as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primped. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well and take pride in my work. I had been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless, the staff was immaculate. Like run a white-gloved hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white, kind of clean. And the food was always top quality. I had frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I had been in the business for a decade and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days you couldn't be perfect enough and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children, she would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff. Accuse them of doing it on purpose and then give us all the silent treatment for hours after. Seriously. If someone's cash out was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raul enters the story. Raul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to be sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raul. This made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position, so I pointed that out. Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time a while later, while filing out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something. All the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone. She told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later I walked back in the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English. Nu Rusa. Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow. Where is your green card? What are you talking about? Rosa was confused. Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here? To hide the proof? Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. What? Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right? Of course I know that. Jan snapped back. Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native. Oh. Right. Never mind Rosa, you can go back to work. Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that and she never apologized. I had already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raoul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his "F-king lady" was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raoul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all you illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, King hated this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against the health codes. And once her fake nail fell off into the coleslaw and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway. I told Raoul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination since I had documented proof with Jan's signature. That he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raoul. The last time I saw Jan was on my way out of Raoul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated. At least the ones that I knew about. Apparently there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? At my deposition I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case and no one has heard from her since. Raoul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time? Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you got your things together. I also hope you learn to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up a huge, gigantic FK up due to your own negligence, now would you? What do you think about this story? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. If you liked the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories. Thank you and have a nice day.
Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called "So You Want to Falsely Accuse Me of Touching Your Kid, Huh? Let's Dance," from the PROREVENGE subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the OP's point of view. Enjoy it. Background: I work in social work with individuals with intellectual disabilities. Part of that work involves working with children who have mental health issues, CMH. I am currently the only male staff in the area who's qualified to work with kids because it requires a ton of special training. The cast: me, a 25-year newbie to social work. BK, brat kid, a decent kid with some brat-like tendencies and one awful a mother. BM, brat's mom, BTCH mom, or piece of literal, non-figurative SHT, take your pick. DW, Daniel Fing Webster, the greatest lawyer who ever lived, reincarnated into a local defense attorney. With that all said, let's get down to business. Exposition: time to do the adult thing. In 2012, I moved out of my parents' home and back to the town where I went to college, having taken a job at a local social workplace. It's a great place. Has its issues much like any similar business, see my other posts. But at the end of a day, their heart is in the right place. One of my duties early on was to work with 3 kids, BK and 2 others, in a neighboring town, 15 meters away or so. Each Wednesday 3 male staff would all go over and hang out with kids. It went well, each kid pack bonded with a different member of the party, and we made great strides with them. The kid who pack bonded with me was of course BK. Most of their issues involved behavioral stuff. So we had to stop them from picking on each other. Mostly though, we played Minecraft and Roblox. Yeah, I got paid for that. It was the best, and it went on for about 6 months or so till school got out in May of 2013. When summer went by, BK was out of the party cause he had other stuff to do. Camp stuff, Anyway, summer gets out, and BK is back with the group. Now, as I was preparing to work with him again, I'd heard around the office his mom was quite a pill. Now, we live in a tiny little conservative community, and unfortunately the populace is a bit racist. The woman's Hispanic, and I'd noticed a trend that any Hispanic parents were often disparaged in the office, so I didn't think much of it. Rising action, why the hell didn't I see this coming? My first time back with the kid, we decided to go swimming. Now, we'd done this before, usually with 2 staff, but the kids aren't that much of a handful, so I took the shift on my own. NBD, right? Anyway, swimming goes well, but when we're getting out of the pool and in the locker room, I get dressed on my own, then come out to find BK just standing there, naked as the day he was born. I encourage him to get dressed and he says no. Again, while avoiding any eye contact whatsoever, "Hey, that ceiling tile is interesting AF, ya know?" I tell him again he needs to get dressed. BK says, "If you don't let me do what I want, I'll say you touched me." Excuse me, what the F? I play it off as NBD, telling him, well then I won't be able to work with you anymore. He apologizes. I get back to the office and say, "Hey, by the way, this kid threatened to say I touched him." Boss and I make a note of it and we both agree he had to have heard it somewhere. As the fall goes on, kids having trouble in school. Mom behind the scenes is apparently trying to convince people that one of the other kids at group is touching him. I don't put 2 and 2 together, but def stand up for the other kiddo. He's very into women and thinks boys are icky. BK, on the other hand, is about as touchy-feely as Liberace in a penis factory. I note this all in doc, of course. Mom continues asking me to work with him one-on-one. Again, no connection made. Sweet, more money. I do it. Documenting thoroughly, of course, anytime he does weird SHT, which is increasingly often. It's all going pretty well, then comes my TIFU moment. Climactic moment, this is theater lingo, not sex, you damn perverts. So once a month, we do a kids overnight at a neighboring town. We go to a hotel, swim, play video, and so on. Come November, boss is encouraging me to let some of the kids I work with go along, so I tell parents. Only BM is really interested, so BK goes with. All goes well, till bedtime anyway. At this point, BK snags the big bed that's usually reserved for 2 kids. I have to stay in the room with him, so I get a blow-up mattress ready. Then the little SHT asks me to use the bed too. Excuse me, what the F? We of course have separate beds, but it really didn't matter in the end. On January 2nd, it happened. BM made a formal accusation. She went down the line saying I did everything in the book at every location we'd ever visited on our outings. Diddled him in the library, diddled him at the park, diddled him in the hotel room, with vivid account of penetration for good measure. Now, this is the point in the story where BM's job becomes incredibly important. See, she works at Department of Human Services, aka the place in my state that hands out food stamps, welfare checks, and accusations of child abuse. She's just a food stamp pusher, but she likes to use discrimination as a battle cry anything doesn't go her way. And so despite no evidence, she forced the issue. DHS makes a formal 30-day analysis, and when it's all done, guess what? I'm cleared. End of story, right? Nah bro. Mom appeals, without my knowledge, and adds an hour-long dull therapist session into the evidence, without my knowledge. The case goes from unfounded to confirmed, founded and placed, without my knowledge. March 28, 2014. Suddenly I no longer have a job and can't work in my chosen field for 10 years. Excuse me, what the F? Falling action, enter Daniel Fing Webster. So up until now it's probably not been super clear why mom's pulling this SHT. Thing is, she's out of home because she's out of money, and she wants to sue my place of employment to get a new home. Currently they're living in a donation house that's set to be demolished. I find out this and other facts during my investigation period. At this point revenge isn't on the mind, I just want to get out of the hellhole I've been thrown into. First thing I do is start asking around town. Lady has a rep, after all. I talk to the cop who refused to arrest me due to no actual evidence, and he says she's been pulling SHT with him for years. For example, he's trying to get the library director arrested for refusing to cancel her overdue fine, discrimination of course. We talk for some time and he ends it with, well, maybe I'll start telling her no a bit more. I then head over to the library, and sure enough, the director's all too happy to chat with me, off the record of course due to confidentiality. The conversation ends with, well, maybe I'll call her about getting that fine paid. This continues for a few stops as I slowly release her stranglehold on prominent community members, effectively ostracizing her. At one stop, someone suggests I head to a local lawyer who's well known for not taking any SHT. I head over to his office and we chat a bit. He agrees to take the case for half price. At first, he thinks I'm a raving lunatic with serious paranoia issues. As time goes on, he collects evidence that paints a very clear picture of what she's doing. He says to me, you know, I think she's making the whole thing up to get a lawsuit. The state's attorney general, yes, really, at first can't understand why he's giving out subpoenas faster than Charlie Sheen gives out STDs, but after seeing the evidence she gets on board too. Only problem is the local DHS does not. See, they want a definitive answer, not a settlement. Why? 'Cause they want to fire BM. By this point, DW can't stand those a-holes, but we have to let it play out. My favorite moment from this period is a phone conference where BM calls in, trying to stop my appeal and gets told to shut the F up by Attorney General and DW. She leaves the call sobbing as she's kicked off by her own counsel. At last, we determine in settlement that I take a polygraph. If I pass, the state drops everything. If I fail, I drop my appeal. If it's inconclusive, it goes to trial. Now, DW straight up says, I never tell people to take polygraphs. People say one thing and the polygraph shows another. It's almost never good for a case. But you need to take that polygraph. He did this under the full understanding that we could walk at any time if it appeared to go in a direction we didn't like. And I said yes because, quite frankly, I was out of money. So I take the polygraph. And pass. In the minimum amount of time allotted for the test. Merry effing Christmas. Denouement, sweet, sweet revenge. Now, as you may have been noting, I've been taking little actions here and there to prevent this woman from exercising influence. Hoo boy did they add up. After my polygraph test, the woman was immediately fired. The other DHS employees had throughout been telling my bosses she's a fing moron, and suddenly they're not allowed to say anything about her. They dropped her like the dirty rotten beer SHT that she is. I immediately file a cease and desist order to prevent her from saying one damn word about me. My boss calls me in, yes I got my job back, looking very angry. She says, do you have any idea what you've done? Then grinning, tells me BM pulled her kid from our program. A few weeks later, I'm walking through Walmart, and guess who I see? Their newest employee, BM. I take the high road and avoid her while simultaneously taking the low road and asking others who know her what's going on. Turns out she lasted a month or two at Walmart before trying the same damn SHT and getting kicked out on her A. Last I heard, she moved out of state and was later seen trying to file her taxes illegally in our state. Her own lawyer screamed her out of his office. In the end, I don't know how much my own actions actually brought about her downfall. She more or less did it to herself. I just saw her on a cliff and pushed. Silly BM. You thought I'd be an easy mark. TLDR, woman tries to accuse me of touching her kid, inadvertently sets up every aspect of her downfall. I help. Obligatory number 2. Let me make it very clear that I don't want any politicization. My current stance is that I believe survivors until they are proven wrong. DHS did their job in taking this seriously, and my lawyer did his job in disproving it. I had previously said the system works, but I now realize this wasn't accurate in conveying my opinion. The system is horribly broken, but it is most often broken in favor of people like me. I don't want my story being used as an excuse to deny victims a voice. I also don't want any racist BS. People often use their skin color, ethnicity, religion, etc. to get free things. This is just an extreme example. The woman's unbalanced AF, but she is not representative of a whole. Last but not least, this was an administrative appeal, where far more onus is on me than necessary to prove the appeal is warranted. If you're offered a poly with conditions in a criminal proceeding, it can only hurt you. Thanks for reading and keeping it respectful in the comments. Edit, I figured I'd best explain what a polygraph is for those unfamiliar. In simpler terms, it's a lie detector test. How it works is actually very different from what you see in the movies. What happens is a highly trained state agent comes in who specializes in lie detection. He talks to you for about 2 hours to get a good gauge on who you are, then he tells you what the questions are going to be. There are 10 questions, and 2 to 3 of them are asking you about the allegation. The other 7 are about random things, with 1 question you're supposed to lie about. After you go over the questions, you get hooked up to the machine. There are several rubber probes put on various parts of your body, and you do a test run 10 questions. He tells you if you need to calm your SHT, I did. Then he runs 3 to 5 frames of the same questions. If the results are still inconclusive after 5 frames, it's judged as inconclusive. If you fail the test, there's a higher than average possibility you're lying. As you have the same responses to the 3 allegation-related questions as you do to the control question. If you pass the test, there's a somewhat higher than average possibility you're telling the truth. The control question helps gauge if you're cheating the test or just really good at lying. These precautions are all because a polygraph test on its own can tell you very little. Without it, the test would be entirely worthless. And no, it is not admissible in court as hard evidence generally speaking, though often as part of a settlement deal. People agree to take the polygraph to avoid administrative court as I did. What do you think about this story? Tell me your thought in the comments. If you like the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories.
Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called My Ex-Wife Learned the Hard Way to Not Ignore a Court Summons. From the PROREVENGE subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the OP's point of view. Enjoy it. A bit of background. I was married to a woman for 15 years and ended up divorcing her because she liked to sleep with other guys. While it took me 6 years to stumble on to this fact, she worked from home, I commuted 2 hours each way into the city, I owe it to her being either a sociopath or a narcissist, or both, why not? She could absolutely turn on and off the charm and could come up with lies staring you right in the eyes. Hindsight is 2020. Let's call her V, short for Voldemort, as one time when I was talking about her after the separation, I referred to her as she who must not be named, and the nickname stuck with all my friends and family. During the marriage, my ex and I were best friends with another couple, and for this post we'll call them Sam and Marie. Sam was, still is, my best friend. Marie was V's best friend. Marie had found about V's plans to cheat on me prior to me finding out and told V that she couldn't condone infidelity and their friendship would end if V did cheat on me. No, Marie did not tell me, and I don't blame her for not doing so. When I finally found out V was having a Facebook affair, if you're going to have an online affair, don't do it while married to a computer expert with some dude in CA. We lived in MA, it was just 2 weeks before V was flying him out and putting him up in a hotel for 3 days. I spent those 2 weeks getting a lawyer, a pie and my exit strategy together. I left her the weekend after their hotel stay. She would spend the days with him and come home for the afternoon, evening without a shred of guilt showing in her actions. The pie having gotten pics and video of them leaving the hotel and eating lunch together and heading back to the hotel. I first stayed at Sam and Marie's in their in-law basement apartment, eventually moving to a small apartment back in the town where V lived. Fast forward 9 months and I'm divorced from V. Why it was so short to divorce is another tale worthy of this subreddit. We had one daughter, let's call her Rebecca, she was 13 at the time, between us still at home and we're trying shared custody and live about 1/4 mile apart. There are other kids from the marriage, but they were living apart from us at that time and don't play a part in this part of the whole story. We had acquired a lake house during the marriage and had it listed to sell. And we had it written into the divorce agreement to split the proceeds. But paying half the mortgage on that and the rent on my apartment was really stretching me thin financially. One day Marie emails me, subject line in all caps, V just tried to get me fired. Long story short, V emailed Marie's boss claiming that Marie was gossiping about V on sales calls to customers, but her boss knew it was BS and told V as much. Wisely, Marie didn't mess around waiting to see what was next. She went to the local courthouse that day and filed for an anti-harassment order against V. It took several visits to the judge, as V chose to ignore multiple summons to court so that the judge could hear her side of the story. Eventually the judge granted the order because V never showed up to court. During this time, V called 911 on me multiple times, one time claiming I put a letter bomb in her mailbox, and 2 other times I had entered her apartment without her permission. The letter bomb accusation was due to me posting a link to shipyourenemiesglitter.com on Facebook months before, and subsequently mailing her a thick bundle of forms to sign. Police were called and I had to go to V's apartment and open the letter in front of the police. Needless to say, there was no glitter, let alone a bomb. Oddly enough, this accusation came just days after there had been an actual bomb threat called into the town hall. Funny that the 2 times I had gone into her apartment had both been to drop off Rebecca's book bag when she had forgotten it at my apartment. Both times I had texts from V granting me permission to open the door and put the book bag just inside. She would then text me after I had done so, trying to revoke permission. To this day, I think V thinks that if she deletes a message on her end, the message is deleted on my end. Even though kids will be kids, and Rebecca did forget her book bag at my place on at least one other subsequent occasion, I did not fall for V's ruse a third time. All forgotten book bags were delivered by Rebecca and I meeting halfway between the apartments. Also included with the multiple 911 calls were multiple minor child wellness checks on evenings when I had Rebecca at my apartment. It's so much fun having to explain to your child why the police are showing up at 8 o'clock at night to check to see if she is okay. Basically, V was trying to get me frustrated and react badly. Throughout this whole mess, Sam and Marie have been lifesavers to me and Rebecca. Hosting and cooking weekly family dinners for us, they are Rebecca's godparents, and just being absolute rock steady in their support and tolerance of the situation. Around this time, V filed for sole custody. At the strong urging of my lawyer, I insisted on a guardian ad litem (GAL) being appointed to represent Rebecca's best interests. Her being a minor child. Of course, the parents must pay the fees of the GAL. At this point, my finances are really getting worrisome, so I write an email to V saying we need to drop the price of the lake house and get that sold regardless of profit. I needed that albatross off from around my neck so I could continue to afford to live where I could co-parent Rebecca as well as fight the custody battle. So there I am, going deeper into debt, can't pay rent and mortgage long term, and V is starting another court battle for full custody. With no other choice, I move back in with Sam and Marie so I can continue to pay my lawyer and keep fighting. About a week after I'm settled back in with Sam and Marie, I hear from Rebecca that V's glass patio table was smashed the previous night. I was in NH that evening with witnesses, so it couldn't have been me. I was paying for Rebecca's cell phone and we have Life 360, so we could know where each other was at any time. Due to an earlier threat by V to take the two youngest kids and move to CA to be with the idiot from Facebook. Plus it had history, so I could at least prove my phone was in NH. Rebecca says she knows I was in NH and tells me she'll tell her mother it wasn't me. The next day I was served with a restraining order (RO), claiming that I had vandalized V's patio furniture and that she still felt afraid due to the letter bomb incident. The cops knew it was bullshit, but the judge had no knowledge of the incident when V filed the RO and had to take her at her word. The RO was for 10 days and then I could show up in court and contest it being continued. The officer who served the RO explained that he had to confiscate any firearms and licenses. While I did have a recently acquired Class A concealed carry license, actually from a couple's firearms course that was an anniversary gift from V the previous year, I hadn't any firearms other than a BB gun of Rebecca's. The officer left with just the Class A license, smiling as he said he was pretty sure I wasn't going to go on a rampage with a BB gun. The first thing I did the next day was to go to the police station and request all incident reports that involved me since I left her. I knew of 7 incidents, but the desk sergeant informed me they had 19 incident reports from V. He talked to me a bit, clearly trying to get a feel for what kind of person I was, and just what was going on. We parted company with him assuring me that the patrol officers would now know what was going on, and the PD would do right by me so long I kept my cool. Fair enough. 2 nights before the court appearance to contest the RO, Sam, Marie and I are sitting on their porch, drinking some beer and brainstorming about what I'm going to say to the judge. I'm a bit discouraged because I know it's going to be a he said, she said situation, and I'm living in Massachusetts. If your chromosomes don't match, you are a second-class citizen when it comes to parental rights in MA. Plus, V deserves an Oscar for how well she plays the victim. It wasn't looking good. My only hope was if V decided the RO itself was enough to make me look bad to the gal and not show up and let the RO expire. Marie suddenly said, "Hey, let me see the RO." I handed it over to her. "Hey, this is my judge." She's the judge that granted me the anti-harassment order against V. You're kidding. Sam and I looked at each other in amazement. I swear it is. Let me go get it. Marie goes inside and comes back a few minutes later with her court order. Sure enough, it's the same judge. My grin felt like it was going to split my lips. Now I knew exactly what to do. Now for the meat of the story. The court date to contest the RO arrived and I'm there first thing, just me. No lawyer, because he had to appear in court elsewhere. I strongly hoped that V wouldn't show up, but she did, with someone other than her divorce lawyer, and before court was in session her new lawyer approached me and offered to let the no contact order lapse but wanted a do not abuse order left in place. I politely declined her offer, stating I had done nothing to warrant either order and that I wanted the judge to hear my argument. V's lawyer was taken aback by this a bit and then shrugged as if to say, "It's your funeral," and walked back to where V was sitting. We went in front of the judge and V told her side of the story and I started telling mine, introducing all the incident reports from the police department, but V and her lawyer didn't have copies of all of them, so the judge sent us back to the gallery to await second call while V and her lawyer reviewed the reports. When we were called back, the judge started to go into the content of the police reports and I stated that the content was almost irrelevant, but she insisted on going through them. During that V emphasized the two incidents where I briefly entered V's apartment with her permission, but she characterized them as me doing so without her permission. I said that if necessary, I would be able to provide the communications where she gave me permission, but I didn't have them with me today. When going through the first police report from the night I found out about the online affair, wherein V claimed I had brain lesions, V also tried to characterize me as having multiple personality disorder as told to her by our shared primary care physician. The judge asked her with no little incredulity, "His doctor told you this without his permission?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at me, puzzled. I shrugged and said while slowly shaking my head in disbelief, "I have a very close relationship with my doctor, and I highly doubt he would violate HIPAA." She looked a little nonplussed, but I think she got the message that V wasn't being entirely truthful. As that was the last police report to go, I reminded her that my point wasn't the content, but that I thought V was using the courts to harass and intimidate me and to make me look bad to the gal, and I brought up that this isn't out of character for V as she has an anti-harassment order in place against her, put there by Your Honor, Your Honor. Asterisk. The judge blinked at that bit of info. I gave her the details and reminded her that V declined to show up at the multiple hearings. As I recounted the particulars of Marie's story, the judge squinted her eyes more and more and her frown got deeper and deeper. She turned to V and her voice was slow cold fury. "Do you have an anti-harassment order in place against you?" V's voice was so small and weak. "Yes, Your Honor." I so wanted to look at V's face to see her reaction, but I kept my eyes locked on the judge. The judge pointed at V. "Why didn't you show up to the hearings?" A pause as V struggled to find some excuse. "Because I didn't want to associate with that," but the judge waved her to silence. I think that was the turning point, as I think she was going to grant their request for the do not abuse, but she turned to me and said sternly, "I think there is a bit of this going on both sides, but clearly she wants you to stay out of her apartment." "Never again, Your Honor." Restraining order terminated, and with a bang of her gavel, we were done. Because the RO was terminated, legally that meant it never happened. I got my class a concealed carry license back the next day and ultimately won the custody battle, a large part of which was the termination of the RO, but also due to V's subsequent increasingly poor emotional and verbal treatment of Rebecca. What do you think about this story? Tell me your thought in the comments. If you liked the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories. Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called How to Pressure a Teenage Boy into Dating Your Daughter 101 from the Entitled Parents subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the OP's point of view. Enjoy it. How to Pressure a Teenage Boy into Dating Your Daughter 101. Posted yesterday about how an EP at my school got involved when her daughter didn't win Homecoming Princess, and some people asked if I had any other stories. This involves the same EP and daughter, but takes place a year later, when I was a junior. Again, I'm not directly involved, but the victim in this story was, and still is, one of my closest friends. He'll be referred to as A, the daughter is still V, and the mom as EP. Also, in all honesty, I and our other friends found the entire situation to be hilarious, both during and after it happened. A is a very lackadaisical, happy-go-lucky kind of guy, and it just seemed fitting that he would be the one who'd get caught up with V and EP. Onto the story. So for those who didn't read the previous story, EP is now the freshman counselor at my high school, and her daughter V was now a senior. I ended up having class with her newspaper yearbook after the co-princess debacle of the previous year, and my impression of V was that she seemed a little entitled, but besides that was social and hard-working. She was in charge of the sports pages for the yearbook and always met her deadlines, so she was okay in my book. Now V and A were both on the swim team, being a junior like me. Like I said before, A is the definition of go with the flow, but he does have a good work ethic, took AP classes, and was active in several other groups, including the very rigorous architecture and engineering program. In addition to this though, A was a stoner on the side and went to his fair share of parties. Somewhat important later. One day in newspaper, in like mid-April or early May, I noticed that V was excitedly giggling about something in our classroom. The yearbook had already been submitted, so their staff was basically writing the school year out. I didn't pay very much attention to it until my friend B whispered at me, "Did you just hear V? She's going to ask us to prom." For the non-American readers, prom is just an end-of-the-year dance held for the juniors and seniors. It's basically like a farewell to your high school life, and kids will go all out for it, renting limousines, posing for formal photos and paying out the wazoo for attire. I turned around a bit to look at V and noticed that she had a whole bag of stuff next to her, and was working on a card. I've known her since we were 12 years old, and I knew he didn't like V in that way, but hey, it wasn't my business and I had work to do, so I pushed it out of my head. 2 or 3 days later, I overheard her happily talking about how he said yes, how excited he seemed, and how she was going dress shopping ASAP with EP after school. At that point, I really wanted to hear A's perspective on all of this. I swung by his house after class with the homies to find him lazing about, smoking in his room with a bunch of balloons and some confetti in his hair. We all talked for a while until he said, "Oh yeah, dunno if you heard, but apparently I'm taking V to prom." I confessed that I heard her talking about it earlier that week, to which he replied, "WTF Larny Barney, you could have warned me before she ambushed me." Ambushed? That's when I finally got the full proposal story. V left a series of cards for A, placing one on his car after school, another in his swim bag, another in his locker and architecture station, hinting for him to be in the main hallway after third lunch when there'd be a ton of students. She then dropped a banner that rolled down the stairwell that said something like I hope you'll step up and take me to prom. Obviously, with a third of the student body milling about, people started oohing and cheering, waiting for A to give his answer. In A's words, honestly I wasn't feeling it, I'd rather stay home and play some games instead of spending money to go to prom, but I couldn't just walk away from all of that, she's my teammate. So he walked up the stairs, gave her a hug and said he accepted. Crowd cheers. Two of V's friends come out of nowhere and hand A bunch of balloons, against school rules, toss confetti over A and V, very against school rules, then play music on a Bluetooth speaker while EP takes pictures and video of the whole affair. A spent the rest of the day having students ask when the wedding was and congratulating him on becoming the new co-prince, lol. After our laughter died down, I told him that V seemed to think he was really looking forward to this, and that TBH it sounded like she had a crush on him. I remember he shrugged, smiling, and said, well that's flattering, but I'm just going to take her to prom, help her have a good time, then walk away from this and let the school year end. Well he should have told V that, because in her mind, they were totally dating. She spent the next week following around, hammering out plans for prom, getting his opinion on this or that color for her dress, deciding where they were going to go eat dinner, etc. EP is also taking the opportunity to talk to him in the hallway, gushing about how they make the perfect pair and how wonderful they're going to look together. As far as the student body is concerned, they're dating. A took all of this in stride, still telling himself and us that this was only until after prom, then everything would be back to normal. Prom weekend finally comes and goes, and a few days pass before I see her again. I beat around the bush for a bit before finally asking him how it all went. Without missing a beat, A cheerfully responds, oh, I totally FK up. The gist was this: V asked A if he'd like to come to a family barbecue the day before prom, as a thank you for accepting in the first place. Never one to reject free food, he accepted. During the barbecue though, V and EP repeatedly introduced A as V's boyfriend. A didn't have the heart to correct either of them in the moment but was planning to after the event ended, until EP introduced him to the assistant dean of the engineering department from a major university. After gushing about how talented her new future son-in-law was in our school's engineering program, the dean said that with EP's recommendation, he'd love to have A come in to interview for a potential scholarship. At that point, all of A's plans to tell V and EP that they weren't dating began to crumble. The next day, after taking V to prom, she stole a kiss from him and said, oh by the way, Mom is bringing some recruiters from X university to our swim meet to recruit you. She said she'll do whatever it takes to help my new boyfriend get into a good school. At this point, while I think it's super fucked up that EP is doing this, I am dying from laughter. A doesn't want to make V's final month of high school suck by breaking up with her, and he's also low-key anxious about what EP might do to his chances of getting a scholarship if he breaks her daughter's heart. So, in true A fashion, he decides that he'll just keep up the charade until school ends in a month, then hope V moves on. She was going way out of state for college. For the next month, EP and V smother A whenever they can. Brunch and dinner dates on the weekends, impromptu recruiters swinging by A's classes with EP, who very much likes calling A her son-in-law, V not so subtly suggesting that A follow her to her out-of-state school when he graduates, etc. School ends, V graduates, and starts getting ready to move away for college. A purposely doesn't return her text messages or calls, and eventually she leaves the state. We all have one last laugh and assume it's all over. Wrong. When school starts back up again, EP finds A and starts asking why he hasn't contacted V all summer. And why he didn't come to see her off. And why he didn't buy her a going-away present. Then she hints that she would hate to have set up all those opportunities for him for nothing. A finally stands his ground and declares that he was just very busy with family matters all summer and didn't want to be a hassle to V during such a critical time. EP accepts this and doesn't bother A for the remainder of the semester. Everything seems okay until December, when A gets a call from V. She's coming home for the holidays and wants to see her boyfriend. At this point, all of A's friends, myself included, insist that he finds a way to end this nonsense. A comes up with a plan. As I said before, despite being a very good student, A is a huge pothead and liked going to parties. V, however, never knew this side of A and is very much against drug use. So A decides to get stupid high, have a few beers and meets her at an IHOP smelling dank as F, then tells her that since she left, he's begun using drugs LMFAO. He says that he stopped contacting her because he knew she wouldn't approve and thinks she should break up with him and find someone at her new university who's better for her. Without missing a beat, V declares that she's willing to leave her out of state university and transfer back to our city to help him drop his addiction, because he clearly needs her. I can't believe it, and finally doubles down, insisting that she can't mold her future around him and that she should think about herself first. V finally gives in, and after a rather tearful goodbye, goes back to her school and stops contacting AEP. Never talked to A again about V. She'd always give him a major stink eye though, and all the recruiters she introduced him to stopped contacting him about scholarships. She also made a few snide remarks in front of other teachers about him possibly being a druggie, and even tried to get the school police to search his locker, but no one took her seriously because A at this point was the president or captain of multiple clubs and was still an excellent AP student. In the end though, a 6-week internship he got through the school engineering program ended up offering him a job after high school, complete with a program that paid for him to go to college. He's got a pretty neat job working as a graphic designer now and still gets absurdly stoned on the weekends. What do you think about this story? Tell me your thought in the comments. If you like the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories. Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called My Mother Destroyed My Childhood, Made Me Fail Out of College, and Laughed When I Was Homeless. I destroyed her entire life, from the PROREVENGE subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the OP's point of view. Enjoy it. I'm sorry this post is so long. I'm also sorry to all the people who suggested I take the high road. I didn't. You were all right, it didn't make me feel better. I know the deliberate steps I took to purposely ruin my mother's life makes me a bad person. I'm willing to accept that, and I'm going to continue trying to become the person I believe I can be. Rehash, for those who aren't aware of my life, I'll try to summarize it all, but it's not something that's easily put into a short paragraph or two. Growing up with my mother was worse than hell. If you've ever wondered what it would be like if your worst enemy went back in time to raise you, you'd understand my life. At some point around 9 to 10 I began to realize how alone I was and how exhausting my life would turn out to be. I kept hoping, this time, she'd finally just continue wailing on me. Hoping she'd just never stop beating me and finish the job. Either that or I'd be so close to death she'd be forced to take me to the hospital where they would question her and I'd somehow be saved. It seemed like nobody ever cared enough to look deeper. Dislocated my shoulder with a cast iron pipe, beating me every night until I ate things I was slightly allergic to, and then beating me more for throwing it. You lit my Christmas presents I got, then having to be held back by her boyfriend at the time because she was holding a knife to my neck, telling me for the millionth time that I was worth less than my father and nobody else would care if she did it. I could fill pages with all the things she did to me. I remember when she really started digging in and telling me I was worthless nearly every day. I was 13 and it was the first time I started contemplating suicide, though I was always too weak to follow through. My mother tried to kill me 3 or 4 times if you count a half-assed poisoning. I say half-assed only because I vaguely remember the details, but it involved her forcing me to drink something with bleach in it. It's kinda funny in a sick way because I didn't even remember that until now, and that's not as bad as all the things I've put a lot of effort into not remembering. I just have she *** memory, so I guess it helps. I don't think I've actually went longer than a few weeks without getting beaten bloody over something trivial like not washing dishes fast enough or walking away too hard after just getting beat up by her. Years of physical and psychological attacks. Did I call the cops? Of course I did. Can you imagine how hard it was to watch my mother smile and lie to the cops? Telling them I was exaggerating. Then having to watch them get into their cars and drive away knowing I had to go back inside. In the beginning I had hoped things would change. Towards my teen years I started drinking and stopped caring, and now here I am after all of it, somehow still alive. My stepdad used to tell me years after his divorce with my mother that he only stayed with her because he was afraid she'd kill me one day. He's lucky he never saw how much worse it got when he wasn't there to take the hits for me anymore. It would break his heart. He was also the one who told me about my mother's being sexually abused while growing up in a different country, which helped me to gain some perspective in my teens. Not that it made a difference by then. It didn't matter to me because each and every day she had a choice every time, and she'd choose to hurt me every time. Maybe I'm overstating things considering she didn't actually kill me, even though she has come close so many times. Maybe that means deep down she secretly cared about me or something. I don't know. I don't think about it. She did go out of her way to buy me new electronics often, but she'd end up using those as leverage against me and invading my privacy constantly, so it ultimately wasn't that much of anything. After everything and all the time she kicked me out from 13 to 17 years old, I was always on edge. She told me when I was 18 while I was staying with my aunt that if I went to college, I'd always have a place to live. I don't know why I believed her. I had went to go stay with my aunt temporarily for 4 to 6 months after my mother kicked me out of the house at 17, but my mother would always stop by and buy groceries for me or leave me cash. She was unnaturally kind to me while I was there. By this point she wasn't hitting me anymore and was more so prone to just verbal attacks, but since I was never really around her anymore, life seemed to get easier. My mother had learned more than enough ways to fuck with me without touching me. It seemed like she hated me more than I hated myself at times. My aunt couldn't have me stay with her anymore as she really liked her privacy. I had already been there for a while, and I was a emotionally damaged and rebellious teenager she didn't have time to help. So, I went back to my mother's house for the last time and started attending community college full-time. I didn't really have any desire or passion, I was just an empty husk going through the motions, but I was still trying my best to keep living even when I didn't feel the will, in the hopes that one day I'd feel something different for once. My mother, of course, decided to go back to her old habits. Things like dumping all the trash with dirty diapers and old food or dirty dishes filled with water on my bed when I was out if I forgot to do them, and sometimes just because she was in a mood. Locking me out in the snow for hours because I didn't respond to a text or something even if I had class in a few hours. I wasn't even allowed to have keys. She'd pretend not to hear me when I rang the doorbell or knocked for hours. She'd also tell my younger sister to ignore it. I'd eventually end up having to sleep on the steps outside or at a friend's house and get punished for doing it even though I was 18 because it was her house and her rules. It was always non-stop. I had no real direction and I honestly had no plans to exist past 25 years old. Despite literally all of that and then some, I was doing well in school, community college, with a 3.6-ish GPA. I finally left my mother's house for the last time a few days before finals week. I came home from drinking with friends and was met with my mother glaring at me when I rang the bell at 9 p.m. yelling when I'd move out as soon as I walked in. She followed me to my little closet of a bedroom where I tried to close the door behind me and she half ripped the door off the hinges. I just sat there on my bed and stared at her silently as she kept cursing and screaming questions at me. My mother then walks away and as I'm in the kitchen getting juice I hear her on the phone calling the cops on me, claiming she was scared I'd murder her or my younger siblings. I just didn't have the energy to deal. This was 3 days before I failed all of my finals because I couldn't even make it. I was dealing with too much. So, I went and grabbed whatever I had and left 15 minutes later. My mother and I only ever really communicated via email after, though it was very rarely and it was very businesslike. I'd tell her what I needed and she'd either tell me to F*** off or give it to me. It was hard to maintain consistency in my life then. I was at rock bottom all the time. I didn't care about anything, I drank every day, hung out with the worst kind of people who brought out the worst in me. I bounced between cheap rooms and couches. It was early 2016 when I discovered photography and it completely changed the direction of my life. I didn't hang out with anyone or bother trying to maintain all the pointless relationships. I just dove headfirst into it. I was able to put the things I didn't understand about myself into perspective. For the first time in my life, I felt something. Not like a feeling per se. Just like this sense of possibility. For the first time, I was seriously wondering just what I could be capable of. I had something to look forward to. I felt like if I pushed myself as hard as possible I'd be good at something and I'd be a good person. And so I isolated myself from nearly everyone I knew and spent every single day learning or practicing or being frustrated that I wasn't getting results. Even though I was drinking heavily, I always held a job and kept doing photo shoots and kept practicing like mad. I eventually got my first apartment and was functional for a year. Did I have my shish *** together? Hell no, but I was figuring my shish *** out. Cue one of the worst days of my life followed by an email by my mother asking how I've been. We ended up talking on the phone and it was civil for like 3 minutes before I mentioned how hard things have really been for me. She was bragging about some new expensive speaker system she bought and I, like a dumbass, asked her for money, about $100. I told her if I could give my landlord anything he'd be reasonable and give me time to get more cash together and I'd be fine. Lol, that obviously did not go well at all. It all escalates to her literally laughing and then telling me it was my own fault for being homeless. She also completely denied ever abusing me when I stated I was in the situation because of her. I hung up on her. My thoughts were all over the place and I felt this intense frustration more so than anger. Within a few moments my head cleared and I had decided something as I was sitting in my bedroom 5 or so minutes after the call. I decided that was going to completely ruin my mother's life no matter what. Revenge, and so I did. I called CPS on her and informed them of my history of abuse at her hands. I informed them about the dozens upon dozens of old photos I have of myself all bloody and bruised up. I previously compiled as much evidence as possible in my teens, though never did anything with it until that point. That sparked a visit which led to an emergency removal of my 3 younger siblings when they caught my mother punishing my little sister coincidentally when they happened to do a visit. My mother was also arrested but released hours later. I reached out to the job she got years ago with the fake resume she made me write for her and made them aware of her falsehoods. Because of her field, it was promptly looked into and she was fired as well as blacklisted. She lost nearly $80K plus salary. I then deleted every email in all of the email accounts I made for her because she never changed the passwords. Afterwards, I deleted the email accounts themselves. Within a few weeks things were definitely going downhill for her. My youngest sister's dad was engaged to my mother and is now trying to file for sole custody of my little sister who's in CPS custody. I'm sure he wasn't happy finding out what his baby daughter has in store if my mother was given free rein. She's missed her court appointments and I know she hasn't been able to pay her mortgage since last year, as I've heard she had to ask one of her friends for money. Her life had become a creamy messy symphony and I was the fecal splattered conductor. It was all going to S***. She went radio silent for months and had a warrant after missing another court date. This was all fall/winter of last year that she was off the grid, so I went on with my life. Early 2019 I get a random call from her and find out she went to her home country months ago after everything went to shish*. How she was allowed on a plane, I have no clue. So cue another geyser of bull** spewing from my mother's mouth. She's telling me I need to tell CPS she's a good mom and that she's never abused them or me. It's unbelievable. So I cut her off and I shut her up. I was a little buzzed when she had called and had always mentally prepared for this moment. I started slowly telling her in graphic detail about all the gross shish** I used to do to her food because it. I told her how I used pie** in the picture of the Lipton iced tea she used to force me to make for her and then not allow me to have. I told her how I'd secretly sabotage her utensils with my butt cheeks before serving her food. She was quiet at first but then began cursing me out, though it didn't bother me. I'm on a roll and I wasn't listening. Her words didn't matter to me anymore. She's blaming me for her life turning out so terribly while fully unaware of how true that statement is in terms of the situation she was currently in. She shuts up long enough for me to get one more word in before hanging up and blocking her number. I thought that was the end of it. I expected my last post to be my final update, but as I've said before, my life is a shish** symphony. The official update**, my aunt and I recently reconnected about 2 months ago. Prior to last month, I haven't seen her in years. We met up and had a long conversation about life and everything, and then she admitted that she talks to my mother nearly every day. She had mentioned all the things happening to my mother but didn't know it was me who started this all. She actually felt really bad for my mother, but my aunt was always a really caring person, so I understand, I guess. I told her I was very uncomfortable with the thought of her talking about me to my mother and asked her not to. My aunt did it anyways. After meeting up with my aunt, I learned through her that my mother was finally coming back to America. She was arriving at the airport in 1 week. The problem was my aunt told her that I was going with her so the three of us could all talk without telling me. I didn't know what the feeling of betrayal really felt like until my aunt told me that. To be honest, as wrong as it sounds, I'd rather my mother just think I died or something our phone call. But my aunt kept insisting that I had to give my mother another chance and I had to learn to be open-minded, and that though she wasn't there all the times my mom did horrible shish *** to me, she loved us both and wanted us to get along. Like I'm supposed to just get along with someone who has tried to murder me. Like my mother has choked me awake for school. If you don't know what it's like to forcefully wake up not being able to breathe and seeing your own mother standing over you at 5 a.m. angrily and tightly gripping your throat, count yourself lucky. But, as I said at the beginning of this post, I've already resolved myself to being a bad person, and so I lied to one of the only people who was kind to me, and I promised my aunt I'd try to have a heart-to-heart with my mom and her and talk out the nearly 20 years of abuse. Obviously that was not happening. When we got off the phone, I called the detectives who gave me their number months back in case I heard from my mother. I asked them a few leading questions about what would happen if so-and-so were discovered, and then I made my plan. I wasn't sure if my mother would make it past customs. How is she able to travel to a different country with a warrant? I didn't know, but if she did, I'd call the police in the bathroom and wait for them to arrive while I sat with my mother. Cue my mother making it past fucking customs because she's my mother. She's a horrible person, but she's good at what she does, which is being horrible. I digress. My mother calls my aunt when she's getting off the planes, and my aunt says she's going to meet her. I told my aunt I'd wait for them in the little Starbucks and then we'd all drive somewhere else. My aunt agreed and went off. I called the detective and told him that my mother was standing a few feet away from me and if they could meet me at our destination we were going to. They told me that was unnecessary and that they'd have officers closer to me come and apprehend her at the airport instead. And so I waited and waited. And then I finally saw them arriving both at the same time. The 3 to 4 officers who had convened in those few passing minutes and actively searching around the food court I sat close to. My mother and my aunt walking down the gate towards me. I felt this overwhelming weight in my chest just kind of settling down deeper and deeper into my gut the closer they got and the more the officers searched. What if they stopped looking when my mother arrived? What if my mother somehow got away with this shish *** again? Countless thoughts, but I just bit them back. I've grown very talented at silencing whatever my inner turmoil of the day happened to be. But my mother and my aunt were animatedly talking as they made their way to where I was sitting. Before they had a chance to say anything, I quickly jumped up and said, "I ordered some teas, let me go see if they're ready," which was the first thing I could think of as they were sitting, but it worked and I dashed off past the cash register to the Starbucks and to the outer part of the food court. Looking back, saying I had to go grab some tea probably wasn't the best thing to say, but I digress. I made it a few feet out the door and half jogged over to the officers who were still looking around the food court area. From where they were, they wouldn't have seen us sitting. I walked over and asked them if they had gotten a call about a woman who had a warrant or something. I mentioned that the detectives said officers in or near the airport would arrest her. They said they did and I told them it was my mother. I told them her first name and they verified her last name. I told them she was sitting right in the Starbucks waiting for jail and one of the cops chuckled. seemed a bit surprised and judgy that I was pointing them right to my mom. I told them I'd go make sure she didn't leave, and they followed behind by like 10 to 15 paces. I half jogged back inside and up to the little table where they were sitting. My mother had that half scowl she always wore whenever she looked up at me when I popped up out of nowhere, and my aunt began asking me where the drinks were before I cut her off and looked dead at my mother and her scowling face, which had quickly changed into confusion when I had finished my sentence. Mom, I know we don't get along, but I wanted to let you know it's all my fault. Cue my mother starting to ask me with this kind of soft motherly voice, what do you mean it's your fault? Why do you tea? But of course I cut her off because there's nothing she hates more than being cut off, and I finally have the power in this situation. Look, B*********. I want you to know exactly whose fault it is and whose P********** drank when you're sitting in jail wondering why the world did you so wrong. She sputtered something and slapped the fucking shish out of me. My aunt's jaw dropped. People are watching. The cops saw it happen as well, as only a few seconds had passed from when I walked in. Into handcuffs she goes. Now she's showing her true colors. Cursing and saying all kinds of things you couldn't imagine a mom saying to her kid. Telling me she'd fucking kill me and so on, etc. I calmly walked behind them as long as I could until they took her to some room and held her until the detective arrived. I wasn't there that long though, as the lack of thrill of it all kind of got to me, and I went home to break a 2-month sober streak. I was there long enough for my aunt to tell me she was disappointed in me and that she doesn't know if she can forgive me for doing something so spiteful and disgusting to her sister. To be fair, I did it completely out of spite, so she isn't wrong. I've already acknowledged I'm not a good person for what I did. Come to find out, my mother was using my aunt's passport to leave and come back to the country multiple times since she left. That's why they never caught her. Now my aunt has some explaining to do, but I wish she didn't have to get caught up in all of this. She has always been kind to me and doesn't deserve it. My mother is facing up to 10 years just for using my aunt's passport alone, and a slew of other charges, including one for child endangerment. Her husband left her. Her kids were taken from her. Her friends have seemingly distanced themselves from her from what I know. After 19 years of abuse, I finally get my revenge, and none of the charges have anything to do with me, which is interesting. Did it feel good? No. I felt nothing. Just the rise and fall of the situation, but nothing really concrete. I expected to feel something. Not even satisfaction or happiness, but something. Either way, the only thing for me to do is continue to work towards becoming the person I want to be. She told me constantly that I was worthless and that I'm nothing. I've told myself the same consistently as well in the past. I've decided I'm going to become one of the greatest photographers of my time, and I'm going to push myself as hard as possible to succeed, so that anyone else who has ever suffered how I have now have no reason to doubt themselves or their ability to be great one day. As for me right now, I currently live in a homeless shelter. I decided to go to one 6 months ago after realizing all the drinking and inconsistency was making it hard for me to move forward. I wasn't saving money and was couch hopping from friend's house to friend's house. A few weeks ago I got a voucher from the GOVT, and sometime in the next 2 months I can find a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment. I've been aggressively saving my small checks. I've been practicing and working on building better habits and just being a better photographer. I don't make much right now, and I know many people will say it's a stupid dream, but I know if I put all of effort into making this work, I can not only be a self-sustaining photographer but more than that. My situation is embarrassing and it's hard, but I know I won't be here longer than another few months. It's not some dream. It's a plan. I'll also be going back to school in the fall and pursuing photography. As for my siblings, that situation is still a bit dicey and I don't think I'll give an update about that, but they're all doing very well. As far as my mother is concerned, as horrible as she was towards me, the only part of me that even thinks about her on rare occasions hopes she isn't having a horrible time. I don't like knowing people are hurting. What do you think about this story? Tell me your thought in the comments. If you like the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories.
Hey everybody! And a warm welcome to a new story. Today's story is called Bully Landlord Gets It in the End, from the PROREVENGE subreddit. I hope you like it and will enjoy the time. If you like my content and this kind of videos, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. As always, this story is told from the OP's point of view. Enjoy it. My first husband was a not very nice man. For 6 years I was belittled and basically a baby factory for him. He was a fantastic father, but a horrible husband. After he finally got his heirs, I was then treated even worse until I finally woke up and decided to leave his ass. This revenge story is not about him. I just had to set the scene. I moved out from the house, taking just my clothes, the car, 4K value, no more, and the computer. I had nothing, stayed at a GF for a couple weeks before I was able to line up a crappy townhouse with roommates. I had nothing, and my bed was a cat pee smelling free couch I was able to score. I wound up having 3 to 4 jobs, with one of them being full-time and once a week. I would not even be able to sleep between jobs. Now, fast forward 1 year. My divorce was finalized and I had fulfilled my year's lease for the townhouse. By this time I was able to furnish the home and my bedroom and my kids' room when they would be with me for visitation. The scumbag landlord, we'll just call him SBL, was a nice-ish landlord during the time of my tenancy. I was a good tenant, never being late with my rent. Although I had roommates, I was the sole name on the lease. SBL would show up often, with some guys that he had to work on something like plumbing tests or whatever excuse he could come up with just so he could be all creepy and hang around trying to converse with me with mild sexual undertones that made me quite uneasy at times. Finally the lease was fulfilled and I was now onto a month-to-month contract, to which at that time I was ready to move out of this crappy townhouse and found a great house in the mountains nearby, and I was simply thrilled now that I got my feet on the ground and can afford a bit better than slum living. My lease stated that I had to give 1 month's notice in order to move out. Unfortunately I was able to get the house I was to move into for the next month, only 3 weeks away. I sent an email to SBL stating that I intend on moving out at the end of this month, in 3 weeks, and he can try to find another tenant. But I did state that if he didn't find a tenant I would still fulfill my legal obligation and pay next month's rent. Within 1 week, 2 weeks before I was move out, he emailed back and stated that was very generous of my offer, but he was able to find a new tenant for the beginning of next month and I would be off the hook. He even tipped his hand by stating that he already collected a deposit from him. Now, something happened within a couple days after that which was no fault of my own nor my roommates. The townhouse came with its own appliances, fridge, oven etc., including a clothes washer and dryer on the main level. My roommate had put a load of laundry in and went to the living room to have a nap. He awoke to find that the washer had malfunctioned with the sensory switch which never stopped the water fill stage, and there was an inch of water in the kitchen and living room. He splashed through the water to turn off the washer and called me to come and help deal with this. I was just getting off of work and I whipped home to assess the damage. It was bad. There was standing water on top of the living room carpet and a good inch of water in the whole kitchen. I called SBL and told him the issue. By the time SBL showed up, I had already got most of the standing water out with the help of my roommate and friends that showed up with shop vacs. SBL didn't seem too upset, which was surprising for me, and had an appliance repair man had come to look at the washer. The repairman even said, "Yep, here's the culprit," and showed how the dial would stick on the fill stage and wouldn't click over to the agitate stage. After replacing the dial and lubricating the whole deal, he left. The next week was chaos as I was busy trying to pack, and SBL had insurance guys in assessing and workers taking out the carpet and cutting 2 feet worth of the lower drywall of the whole main level. The day of the move, though I was still supposed to be there for a couple more days, SBL had let himself in as movers were moving out my stuff with a camera going around taking pictures of everything. I honestly thought that it was for his insurance claims etc. I actually felt bad for SBL. I'm too nice and told him that I would not ask for any of my deposit back, and he responded in front of the loading crew and my roommate, "Thank you, that's very generous of you." We parted ways and I thought that was that. I was wrong. 2 weeks into my new home location did SBL showed up on my doorstep with a summons to appear in arbitration because he was suing me. What? On what grounds? He stated it's all in this paperwork and handed me a manila envelope with 18 pages of everything he was charging me with. All including photos. Now I know why he was going around taking pics. Nickel and dimming me on everything from a bent Venetian blind. That was like that when I had moved in, and some scuffs on walls, etc. But then he also wanted me to pay his insurance deductible and that following month's rent. He claimed that the tenants that he had lined up backed out at the last minute, claiming that they didn't think the place wouldn't be ready in time with the new drywall and paint and so on, so he still wanted me to pay that month's rent. Really? F****. This. SHT. I knew I was more than generous of giving him my whole deposit, and then for him to come back and sue me for thousands. He was not only claiming the damages caused by the flood but improvements he needed to do that should never be or have been my responsibility in the first place. Even cracks in the living room wall that was from the building settling. How should I be responsible for that? Even new lighting, faucets etc. All mainly on the accusation that I was negligent. I wasn't going to have that. I know his was a slummy townhouse complex and most of his tenants were just welfare cases, and maybe he could get away with this with others but not me. No way. I had just got out of a marriage that made me feel insignificant and had horrible self-esteem, but now I had my dignity and felt strong for the first time in a long time. No way was I going to let any more SHT happen to me without my doing something about it. I had 10 days before the date of my arbitration meeting. I immediately got to work, first getting a signed deposition from the very repairman that had showed that day, stating that the appliance was quite in need of maintenance work and the last time he had done any maintenance for him was almost 5 years before. From thoroughly reviewing my rental contract and local laws, SBL is obligated to have all appliances maintained, services every year. I had also talked to some of the other tenants and had heard that this wasn't the first time SBL had sued tenants after the fact. I hunted them down and got sworn statements from them also. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know what to do and mostly didn't show up at arbitration, hence SBL winning by default. No way, I was not going to let him do this to me. I then drew up a rebuttal to each and every claim he had, including photos from the years that I had lived there, printed out all my email correspondence, and even convinced my ex-roommate and one of the movers that heard my interaction with SBL about him, stating how generous it was of me letting him keep my whole deposit, which was a significant amount to come. Day of arbitration. I dressed up in my power suit and with my ex-roommate and worker in tow, showed up at the meeting. Now, in Canada, arbitration is not held in a courtroom per se, but it's still held at the courthouse in a conference room with a judge. We had 1 hour with this judge. Since SBL was the plaintiff, he got to go first with his case. He spent over 40 minutes going over everything and I sat quietly until he finished. Once he finished, I then hauled out the rebuttal in multiple copies, handed to the judge, to SBL and anyone else that wished to have one, and I quickly went over each point. SBL was irate, and interrupted almost every second sentence I spoke. I would pause the moment he would start talking and say sweetly, "I was quiet and polite during your time to present your case, I hope you grant me the same respect." SBL started to get red in the face, especially when I got to the deposition of the maintenance worker for the appliance. I included with that the Tenancy, Landlord Act sections pertaining to appliance maintenance and stated that this was the only record of maintenance that had occurred, and unless he can come up with more recent records from perhaps another company, it was over 5 years since anything had been looked at. With my defense, I had also then counted that I would like my deposit back and my day's pay from work since I had to take that day off to go to this meeting. The judge then made his statement, and I will always remember this for the rest of my life. He stated that first, he was very impressed of my presentation and that I obviously have a good handle on things and can tell that my nature is of kindness and respect, especially with photos of how I had the townhouse furnished and clean and pride in whatever home I would live in. Bottom line. Not only did I win my case, I wound up having SBL owing my over 80% of my deposit back, including interest. SBL's face was priceless. The judge then proceeded to tell SBL that they will be reviewing again all his previous filings, and if there was enough evidence of harassment, he would be reported to the Board of Landlords and Tenants. I don't really know if anything came out of that. Now, I walked away that day feeling on top of the world. Completely justified, and he got a taste of his own medicine. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. Knowing that this guy has a history of suing tenants, I printed up my final results and judge's signature and gave a copy to each and every tenant in that complex. I wanted to warn everyone his practices and to keep notes, photos, etc. so that he couldn't do that to them. But I didn't stop there. He still now owed me money, and I asked repeatedly for the payment. He never responded. He had until a certain day to pay me back my deposit, and on that day I had gone to his house. I looked up his residence under public records as he is a landlord and had to file under a certain address. He didn't answer, though I knew he was home. I rang the bell a few more times, and knocked loudly. He then turned his house alarm on, which at first startled me but quickly turned to humor seeing how much of a pussy this bully turned out to be. I then yelled out loud enough that I am not going anywhere. He yelled out, "Get off my property or I will call the police." Okay, no problem. I got off the property, but camped out on the front sidewalk. I had a fold-up chair, a cooler with water and sodas, a few sandwiches and all my paperwork with me. I was set to stay there forever. I then would tell anyone that would walk by about how I was a tenant and wrongfully sued me and that I have a claim against him and he now owes me money. I let anyone look at the paperwork just to back up my claim. The police did show up. They first went to talk to SBL and he was claiming that I was harassing him, slandering him, and wouldn't leave his property. I was on public property, sidewalk, and it isn't slander if it's true, of which I had all my court-signed paperwork to back me up. I wasn't disturbing the peace, I was simply and quietly seated outside his home and just talking to neighbors about his actions. He was out yelling that I need to leave, and I quietly stated that I would be happy to leave once I am paid, that he was legally obligated to do by that date. I was not going to leave before I got money in my hand, and I was more than willing to stay there and tell anyone that would listen to me why I was camped out. The police stated I wasn't doing anything wrong, that it's public property, I wasn't disturbing the peace, and it isn't slander if it's true. Finally, after an hour of SBL yelling on his front lawn at the policemen, did his wife come out with money. She handed the money to the police, of which in turn handed the money to me, and signed off documenting final payment was complete. I sweetly smiled, thanked the police deeply, and went home. I have no idea whatever happened to SBL and if he is still pulling SHT like this on others, but I hope that I helped put the fear of God in him, that he just can't screw with people because eventually it will come and bite him in the ass. Sometimes, nice guys, or girls, finish last, but with patience, they finish with a win. What do you think about this story? Tell me your thought in the comments. If you like the story and the content, please leave a like, subscribe and share this video. Also have a look into my playlist for more entertaining stories.